Marcel Bloch, the predecessor of the modern Dassault company, defender of France. Hey guys, it's model making time, and today we're looking at the Bloch MB152 from Hella in 1/72 scale, a World War II fighter aircraft that was sadly not quite up to the standards of its day, and well, it still looks quite beautiful. Before we get too far into this, I just thought I'd say I'm a little bit under the weather today, so if I sound a bit off, that's why. But I'll do my best to be as normal as I can. Welcome to French February, guys, or should I say bienvenue Français Février. I probably got French and February mixed up, but at least I tried. This is a whole month dedicated to building beautiful French subjects. That can be those that were made or designed in France, but also could be subjects that were used in or, well, served in France. Whether it's a car that was famous in France or an aircraft designed and built in France, this is a lovely month to celebrate those French creations. If you want to get involved, you can join the Discord where we are running the group build, and there are some of my fellow content creators who are getting on board too. And well, we'll have to see who releases their videos soon. But there's quite a few familiar faces and hopefully at least one new face that we'll be seeing during the course of this month. Remember to stay subscribed to the channel to be kept up to date with the entire of French February, and leave a comment down below. Are you building anything French this month? As usual, we'll be having a look at the history of the plane in real life, then we'll have a look at the kit tree, that's the history of the model kit itself, and we'll also have a look at the build itself before we look at it popping off. So without hesitation, let's get into the history. The Bloch 152 is actually part of a family. That's the Bloch 150 family. Now, this aircraft came about when the Service Technique Aéronautique put out a requirement for the C1 requirement, which we'll get into later, but you may have heard of already. Now, this was a request for a design of a modern interceptor. War was looming, and most air arms in Europe were racing to equip their air forces with the latest and greatest technology, often featuring at air races or at air displays around Europe as well, to show off what they had to export to their neighbours and further afield. France was no stranger to this and was taking part in these regularly, and other nations such as Britain and Italy were regularly taking part in, well, things like the Schneider Trophy. Now, France had put out several different requirements and was exploring different builds throughout its pre-war years, and this aircraft, the Bloch 150, was a response to that C1 modern interceptor requirement. The aircraft was of all-metal stressed skin construction and featured a Gnome 14 KFS radial engine. Its armament was not horrendous considering, well, I mean, look at some of the other contemporaries of the time. It actually featured two wing-mounted Hispano HS-404s. British planes may rejoice at that. Now, the competition is an aircraft that we looked at before. In fact, it was a different aircraft we've already built in this series that actually won the C1 contest, and that was the Morane-Saulnier MS-405/MS-406, which would go on to be probably one of the most well-known French fighters of the war period, and, well, served in other nations as well, such as Switzerland. Now, the Bloch 150 would not quite have the success. There's a reason it didn't win the contest, but that did not stop Marcel Bloch and their Bloch company from researching the aircraft and seeing if they could make it viable. France knew that it was going to need multiple manufacturers, and that's why you ended up with so many different and unique aircraft. If you compare the Caudron Renault 714 to the Bloch 150, to the MS-406, to the Deltline D520, you already start to get a picture of why, well, just how different these aircraft are, and that they were all built to slightly differing and sometimes dropping standards. Now, the aircraft's performance wasn't horrendous, and it continued to be evaluated by the Centre d'Essai du Matériel Aérien, and those service trials led to further amendments of the type, and that included removing wing-mounted radiators that featured on the initial Bloch 150 to a more traditional layout of a radiator inlet underneath the wings in between the wheel wells, which I think most people know as a fairly standard sort of layout for the time. As we mentioned, war was looming ever closer, and in 1938 France pushed for the delivery of 940 modern fighter aircraft. The MS-406 obviously had won the contest, but was not going to be made in significant enough numbers. Neither were a lot of the other aircraft, so there was an opportunity for the Bloch MB-150 to have its time in service. Changes were made for mass production, and they did look at the Americanization of the aircraft with American engines, but that never actually came into fruition. What ended up happening was the use of a known Rome 14N engine, and it was that engine that ended up being used for the first proper version. A quote I found, but I wasn't quite sure where it had come from, but that was the Bloch MB-152, of which there were several variants, some of which had different armaments. In all, 144 MB-151s and 482 MB-152s would be produced. These aircraft were unfortunately not successful. By the time they had gone into production, they suffered from lower speed and lower armament. Remember those two wing-mounted cannons? Well, in the end, there was a lot of different armaments on the MB-152s, and some of that included sort of a more machine gun preferable armament. They were underpowered, underarmed, and really just not the best fighter of their time, easily outclassed by their German counterparts. But France wasn't the only operator of the type, and interestingly, 9 MB-151s were developed to Greece to take part in the invasion of Greece, fighting against German and Italian aircraft. Now, it was Germany who ultimately would snuff out the type in Greece, but it seems to have performed relatively well there. I mean, comparatively. But maybe that was just because it was against some Italian aircraft too, which also had their problems. Although this aircraft was one of the forgotten ones of the war period, Marcel Bloch would end up becoming Marcel Dassault, and, well, that name is all you need to know. They are one of the pioneers of aviation, not just in France, but globally, and their legacy lives on to this day. Now that we've had a look at this aircraft's remarkable history, let's go and have a look at the kitstory. Now, unsurprisingly, this aircraft was initially made by Hella, or at least this kit was initially made by Hella back in 1965, and the box art for it did remain the same for many of the subsequent releases, including 1965, 66, and 67, which was the American Buzz Co. release. A German release was put out sometime during the 60s as well, and then the Hella standard release emerged in 1973. 1979 did see a different box art, which unusually is one I don't mind, because quite often we don't love sort of the 70s, 80s era, but this one was okay. After that, the box art was reverted back to the original box art, which lives on to this day. Before we get to some of the more modern releases, Smur did release the kit in 1988 alongside Intech, which released it in 1993. Hasegawa also had a boxing of the kit in 1996, and in 1990 we saw two releases from both Intech but also from Smur, this time in a more purple boxing. 2006 saw Smur's iconic blue boxing, which I think is what most people know when they think of Smur as a manufacturer, and following that we do have Mr. Craft's boxing, which I assume the kit is probably okay, but I'd be wary of any decals that come with that. As of 2017, the aircraft has been re-released under Hella's branding, and this is part of their Musée series. The Musée series is kind of like Airfix's Vintage Classics. It's essentially their older kits, but released with cleaned up sprues, nicer decals, and some colour instructions for the new decals too. I built a couple of these, including the Breguet 693, I've built the MS-406, and I'm hoping a couple more end up joining this range because it seems to be ever expanding. So I hope we see things like the Dewatine D520, but also things like the Coltron Renault 714, which I'm probably the only person asking for that. But honestly, this newest release from Hella, with the revised decals, multiple marking options, iconic. And I guess that's it for the kit story. Interesting subject overall though, right? Let me know which one you prefer out of the MS-406 and the Bloch MB-152. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts. I thought it was also probably worth saying, whilst we're on the subject, that the MB-151/152 have been in War Thunder. I can't remember if both versions or just the 152 and sort of variants of that, but I have both of them. One's at like rank 1, one's at rank 2, and I've flown both. In fact, most recently I flew one in my War Thunder Wednesdays, where I've started playing War Thunder in VR in simulator mode, so like using full-on like HOTAS joystick, and it's not too bad. If you're playing it in like simulator, it's not necessarily the best. Not always the most armed aircraft, not the most maneuverable, kind of a boom and zoom, but I think it's really cool seeing it in game because you can really see how it looks compared to other aircraft. Like, it really gives P-36 vibes. But yeah, really interesting, and if you'd like to see me fly it, make sure to come along to War Thunder Wednesdays and I'm sure we can play it. And without further ado, I guess we need to get into the unboxing.
The Bloch 152 from Hella. What a lovely kit. And I always love Hella's boxings. Having this like open top lid is really good for storing parts as you're building the kits. Not as useful for me because I build so many kits at one time, but yeah, it's definitely a really good way to package your kits. And I love the artwork on this, it's really cool. The kit comes in just a couple of parts, the sprue, the fuselage parts, and then the engine parts and transparencies. It's really quite simple, but the detail is relatively good considering the age of this kit, and there's not too much of an issue with the production. Obviously there's some overflow that you can see, but considering the age of the kit, I don't think this is really that bad. It's a simple kit. The underneath of the wing is going to lead straight into the cockpit, so this is something you need to bear in mind when you produce this kit. It's quite clear if you've produced like one of Hella's or Airfix's old kits that that's how this is going to look. The pilot included is quite nice, but I ended up not using it at the end, and the transparencies are fine, but I think they are slightly yellowed. I'm going to use something when I make these to try and hopefully make them a little bit nicer, but we'll see. The Bloch decals have been renewed with several different schemes now being added, including a Vichy scheme and 3 other schemes from the type. I ended up doing just the box cover version, but to be honest I wish I'd done this version, which I think looks much nicer, but hey, it is what it is. But it's really nice to have these colourful inserts of the new markings because I think it really helps when you are trying to make them, especially with the Vichy scheme. The instructions are the original exploded instruction views. There's not really too much to see here. It's not the easiest to follow if you're a new modeler, and I wish Hella would replace these, but it is a nice bit of history.
Well, as you can see from the unboxing, this kit is simple. Really simple. There's not really anything surprising with it. There's a couple of sprues in the box. It's quite nice, and the Hella boxes are always quite nice for storing stuff because they have that open top. It's just nice and easy to keep everything together. People seem to really rave over the Hella boxes, which I find odd, but it's probably because I've just been building them for so long. The plastic for Hella kits always seems to be a bit unpredictable. If you look at things like the Brigade's a BR693 that I did, that had really horrible plastic, but then a lot of the other ones have been absolutely fine, so we'll be curious to see how this plastic performs in comparison. So I guess we need to go in and have a look at the construction of this model.
As you might expect, this kit is relatively easy to put together. The cockpit sits on the bottom end of the wing, and the engine is just a couple of parts to put together. The propeller is turnable if you put it in like this and pop the cap on the end, but I ended up magnetising this because this was around the time where I discovered magnetising propellers is fun, and pretty much every kit I've done since then that has a propeller has had it magnetised. I picked the inside of the wing black. This will be the cockpit on the inside, but also it just helps to hide any little mistakes that I might have. You can't really see the cockpits at this scale anyway, and I wasn't super confident on scratch building one myself, so I decided just to paint it black. We'll pop in the little parts that there are and we'll just go from there. Of course, I repeat this step with the inside of the fuselage as well to make sure we get that full black feel. It looks quite thin, but I do a couple of coats just to make sure that it's fully black. And once that's done, I'm going to go in with some glue. This is Tamiya glue, and I'm just going to seal up the fuselage parts. Because the cockpit sits on the bottom of the wing, you don't need to deal with that too much yet. Pretty much this is the plane almost done, because there's very few parts to do on this. Now, I think with these kits you can do it two ways. You can either secure everything in place on the bottom of the wing first, or you can do it once the plane's put together. The cockpits are big enough for you to put the seat in place and get the pilot in. It really just depends on how you do it. I don't put the glass parts on these until after I finish the model, just because I know the spray is going to go up inside where the undercarriage is, but it's something that like some people might do, and then they'll just seal it up with tape or sponge. But yeah, you can do this kit in quite a few different ways. There are struts supporting the tail section that you need to put in place too, and that's the same on a lot of French 30s fighters. This plane looks really weird at the moment because it doesn't have the engine part on, so we need to put that in place. Make sure we get it the right way up. We're trying initially not to glue the propeller in place. Now, if you haven't watched my hack video where I talk about how to do magnetic propellers, and I'll hopefully do a tutorial on that in the future, then this is where it happened really. This was a plane I tried really hard to make sure that it will still spin afterwards, but unfortunately it didn't, so I had to redo it. I'm also putting the undercarriage in place, and that pretty much rounds off the kit. There isn't really too much to it. Having realised that the propeller no longer spins, I cut it off and decided to magnetise it. You can see me here using a Dremel to just cut out a load of plastic from the inside of the propeller, and I'm doing the same on the inside of the engine itself. I'm trying to just do it to the size of the magnets themselves, and once I've got a hole that I think is big enough, I pop the magnet in place. I make sure I get the right polarity so that they are going to stick together, and then I pop one inside of the propeller as well. Now, I've used a mixture of Gorilla Glue and Super Glue, but both work pretty much fine, but I find Gorilla Glue just to be a little bit better. Once everything's glued in place, it's time to prime, and I do so with Life Colours Grey Primer. This is their Panzer Grey, and I have struggled with these for a long time, but I've moved on to using Gallery's sort of trigger style airbrush. In fact, I've got it in my hand right now, and that's the GHAD68 airbrush. Now, this isn't the best for detail, but I do enjoy it, especially when using this Life Colour paint set. Now, I didn't actually use this one in the end. I thought I'd run out of paints, but I hadn't, because this was the second set of this that I bought, because I've actually used this in pretty much every French February I've done. So I just spray the light grey colour on first after I've done the priming, and then I go in and I start doing some of the camo work. I initially start with the green, and then once I finish off the green, I go on to the brown. Now, this airbrush, it was the first time I've used it. I probably could get better detail on it if I turned down the pressure, I think, but I'm not too sure. I just need to learn how to use it. But I ended up going with the brush after I'd done all the airbrushing and just tidying it up a little, but it gave me a really good base to start from. I then did seal it with gloss. I use Make Gloss, and I think it's like their Lucky Gloss series. It's on the screen here. I also dipped my canopy into Looks Like Glass from Dulux Materials, which gives it a really nice sheen that you'll see right at the end, because I hadn't filmed putting that on, but all I did was pop it on with some clear fix and then just paint the frame of the canopy with the paints I'd already used with brush. The decals go on really nicely. I did put them in the wrong place originally because I was following the wrong scheme guide, and I was trying to do the box art one, so I just moved them to where they needed to be, and they're just put on with Microsol and Microset. They go on beautifully. Modern Hella decals are really good quality. They don't flake like the older ones did. Like, genuinely, these were quite nice. Nothing seemed to be out of register either. It just made a really lovely kit.
Well, what do you think? I don't think it's too bad. And the paints you've seen in the construction of this kit, the French set from Life Colour, you're going to see that throughout the entire month, unsurprisingly. But yeah, it's a nice kit, and magnetic props. What a revelation. Really glad that we're using those. I guess we need to go and have a look at the aircraft. Popping off. you've seen it in full, tell me your opinion. Make sure to leave a comment down below if you think I did an okay job. I think in the end this ended up turning out okay. Throughout the entire construction I was really clumsy and I kept knocking off the top aerial masts, but it's one of the unique things of French aviation is having the mast that bends on the bottom and like extends during flight. Always loved that of French aviation. Overall I think this aircraft is nice, and I guess I can go straight into like whether you should buy or fly from this kit. And I think you should definitely buy it. It tends to be quite a cheap kit. Probably wouldn't pay more than like 12, maybe 15 given the price of kits at the moment. But like this is clearly like vintage kit territory with a slightly nicer view to it. So yeah, I'd say if you can get this for like the RRP, it's probably worth a buy, and you can probably find it for a bargain like secondhand. To be honest, if the decals are not the best, there's lots of secondhand options out there, and you could even get an opportunity to make the really interesting Greek version, because there's not a lot you'd have to change for that. Now there were some really unusual variants of the Bloch MB152, including the 155 with American engines and the 157, which was a more powerful known engine, and you can find those on the market as well. And actually the MB157 you can find War Thunder 2, so there's a lot to this family to explore, and I think this is a really interesting jumping off point, especially because it's quite cheap. What I would love to see from Hella is for them to redo this as a proper like starter set, not starter set like Airfix's ones where they like make new tools that are really nice, but include full pots of paint with it, include a proper, like a couple of paintbrushes, because I think kits like this are perfect for that. And I feel like there's so many bad like gift set starter sets on the market that this would be a really good way to have like an interesting French subject. It feels a little niche, but yeah, honestly I think this is a really good kit. I really love it. I think the aircraft is beautiful. I don't know, it's really hard to pick between this and the MS-406. They both have a very charming ruggedness to them. I don't know, it's really difficult. Obviously we all know the D520 is essentially the Spitfire of France, so I'm ruling that out because it's sort of more classically beautiful, but yeah, really interesting kit. The magnetic props I thought was really fun too. Obviously that was in my hack video that I did a few weeks ago, and I really think you should go and check that out as well. It's really easy to do and it does save you a lot of hassle. Although obviously you're creating yourself a little bit more work initially, but it also means if you're transporting things to shows, you can just take the props off and really you can magnetize any parts. So it is a really good hack. But yeah, I think that probably does it for me, guys. Thank you so much for being here today. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, make sure to like the video and drop a comment down below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel too to be kept up to date with all of the French fabulousness of French February. And if you want to join a lovely community of model makers, make sure to join my Discord. The link is in the description below, and you can take part in French February there too. That about does it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Thank you so much to all of my channel members. A big shout out goes to my advanced kit level members, which includes Chris P, Model Making John, Phil, Bob and Genevieve Albridge, Callum's Modelling Centre, Darren Hall, Philip Jones, Charles Parker, Dafty Duck, David Barber, Bobby G, Taggers 365, Jeff's Dioramas, Iron Duke, and my two longest, supporters at this tier of advanced kit, which is Crazy Loacher and Explosive Water. Thank you so much for everyone you helped make this channel possible. If you like what you've seen here today, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with my latest and greatest videos. And there's a video here recommended by YouTube just for you that they think you'll enjoy. So why don't we go and have a look? Bye.